just cough. um, she's going to talk through her house purchase process. So I think right now she's got a dilemma about choosing where to buy and what sort of house type to buy. And we're going to go through her mindsets. I think it's going to help a lot of people as well, because these decisions are not easy, especially when you want to be close to family, choose the right house, pay a right amount and everything. So did you mind introducing yourself? Don't give your surname, just your first name, what you do. Oh, she bakes cake. She bakes an amazing cake. She still hasn't placed my order, but anyway, she's going to introduce herself and then we'll start this interview.
Great. So thanks for having me. My name is Yetunde and I work as a legal operations manager for a litigation funder in London. So I kind of look after and coordinate all of the investment operations, legal operations that kind of support the business and all of the investments that we make. And I've worked there for, actually it'll be 4 years next week. And I currently live in London. I guess I have the privilege of being able to live in my family home while I kind of save for and prepare to buy my home. So that's me.
Congratulations on your 4-year anniversary at work. I hope they give you a big bonus for that.
Well, I'm expecting one, so I hope they do.
Congratulations. So you did say that you've lived with your parents, you got advantage of living with your parents to save and stuff like that. How have you found saving? So sometimes we live with our parents and we have, like, we want to spend money because we're not really paying much rent. Even if we give our parents something a month, we're not paying much rent and stuff like that. How have you found saving living with them? Has it been easier with them, or what do you think?
I think we have to be realistic. It's definitely easier. You know, they want me to get a house of my own. And, you know, I have siblings as well. My parents can't necessarily sort of, you know, be the bank of mum and dad in the way that perhaps I might like them to, or that other people can. And, you know, we've had those conversations, and I can't overlook the fact that if my parents are not going to give me 50k in cash to go and, you know, put down on a house, what they are doing for me is, you know, giving me concessions, I suppose, in my monthly outgoings. Because if I was renting in London and paying like £1,000, like £1,000 in London might get you, like, you know, a 1 bed somewhere or a room in a house share including bills. And so, you know, that's money that I can put into my deposit fund and my savings fund. And look, I'll be entirely honest and transparent with you. I didn't really expect to be buying a house by myself at this stage. And so I don't think like in my early years of working, I don't think I wasn't particularly diligent or dedicated about making sure I put money down to get my own house. You know, I always thought I'd get married first and, you know, we'd have money between us and put down. And you know what, sometimes life isn't exactly as we plan it. And so, you know, I'm of an age now and I'm like, well, I need my own space. I need my own home. Even just, you know, for the sake of having put money into bricks and mortar for investment for later in life, you've got to start thinking about retirement. You know, you don't want to keep paying rent into your retirement and things. So I had to start like fix up and really get serious about getting this done. Yeah. So living with them is okay. They're very easygoing. They're very, you know, we've got enough space in the house, and you know what, it's been fine. That's why I said for me it's kind of a bit of a privilege. I see it as, rather than too much like of an inconvenience. Like obviously it's not, you know, it's not fun and games all the time, but for me it's worked out quite well, and it has allowed me to kind of build up like a decent deposit.
Yeah, so I was telling a friend a while back that, so I'm Ghanaian, and for us, it's normal to live with our parents until we get married off. Like, it's nothing bad or anything about it. And if you live with your parents, you can choose to give a certain amount every month towards the bills or whatever it is. And I don't think people should see that as negative. It's actually a positive thing. Like,
the thing is, I think it's cultural. And the thing is, for me, as you said, it's perfectly normal. This is what we do. This is how, you know, in our culture, this is how things work. I think we kind of collide though. We've entered a culture in which, like, people here, they'll move out as soon as they can. Yeah. If, you know, people don't really, and so to them, I think in this culture, maybe it's a little bit strange. And so I'm very conscious of the fact that it's not something I necessarily talk very openly about, you know, with people who maybe don't understand the culture, but with my friends, you know, and people that do, like, they don't even ask twice. In fact, to them, it's like, why are you going to go out and pay rent somewhere when you've got a home you can stay in with your family until either you buy a house or you get married? Like, why would you? Even when I tried to suggest to my parents, because at one point I was just like, oh, this house buying thing is just getting so long, like the prices just keep going up, I can't catch up, you know, and it's just and I said to my dad, well, maybe I should just go and like just rent somewhere. And I started looking for somewhere to rent, and if I tell you the way that my parents like poured, they just scolded me, like just the way that I never felt my dad basically in not quite so many words effectively just asked me like why I'm being just so silly. So what kind of a silly idea is that? And I was just a bit like, and I thought, you know, maybe they'd be happy to have me out, and you know, we'd both. And my dad was like, I've never had anything more. Why? Even my mum was like, what? So what's the point of you staying here then? Why would you stay here all this time and then go somewhere and be paying? So I just quickly let go. I was ready. I was looking at places. I found somewhere. I even got 1 bedroom, maybe like just North Kent, and I thought I could. It was my mum. She even came to my dad. She said, have you heard what your daughter said she wants to do? At that point, I just realized, you know what, let's just not do this. Let's just keep saving and get something that we can invest in.
I think we shouldn't do what other people do. We do what works for our family and what works for our individual stories and stuff. I wouldn't move out of my parents' house just because we think it's what the culture here does. Like, if I live with my parents, it's fine. My brothers would live with their parents until they get married and move out, and they'll rent a place or they'll buy a place with their missus. And I don't see anything absolutely wrong with that. Do you think that, so other people say that because they live with their parents and they don't pay bills and stuff, and they feel like they're living for free, it's actually harder for them to save because like it's like I'm living a free life, I can spend my money the way it is. I don't see it that way because in my head I'm thinking that money for rent I can put it in savings. What has been your story? Is that money going to a savings, or you found it at first to just spend it because you have a free life?
I think, as I said to you before, I didn't necessarily plan or expect that my house buying finances would be wholly dependent on me. So I think in previous years I've probably been a lot more cavalier and a lot more carefree about how I spend my money, and you know, I save a bit, but you know, it'll be fine in the end and everything will work out. And a few years ago I had to get really serious. I was just like, right, this thing is on me, and if I don't want to stay in this house forever, I need to kind of really start being very diligent about putting proper money aside. So I think one of the things I feel is really important, because for many people this road to kind of getting your own property can be long. It can be long, especially if you don't have the luxury of living in a home where you've got very minimal expenses. So I think it's important to still find a way to actually live and try and enjoy a life. I don't think there's any sense in kind of for 5 years, let's say, if you're saving and you don't go out and all you eat is like, you know, toast and you just have no life. I just think we have to be really realistic. I don't know. I'm the kind of person that I really feel that life is for living, and I don't like to be this kind of person that, you know, let's be in a culture of suffering until we get to this great destination. Because even when you get to that place, there's still going to be bills, there's going to be more bills, there's going to be more. So I feel like you have to establish some, I mean, that's a personal philosophy. I feel like I want to live, I want to enjoy my life a bit. So, you know, I looked at my finances, and I think, look, there's 2 ways really to kind of help yourself towards having enough money to buy a home. It's earn more money and or decrease your expenses. So I think it's between those 2 things that everybody has to. And, you know, when I kind of took a slight change in direction of my jobs about 4 years ago before I joined this company, and effectively I moved on kind of a lateral pay, and I just felt a bit stuck. Because I was kind of starting in a slightly different industry, that move, it wasn't any growth in it. I'd felt like for a very, very long time, and I'd been very stagnant on my salary. It was a very average, I'd almost say a low salary for me, and I was just a bit like, oh. And, you know, I did get a promotion, I did earn more money, and so even before I got the promotion, I had looked at my finances again. I was a lot more diligent about putting away proper chunks of money every single month. I automated it and I put that money away, but I made sure that, you know, my travel was covered. Obviously this was pre-COVID, you know, my expenses were covered, any bills that I had were covered, and that I still had some money to kind of live some sort of life. Like, you don't want to be the one person all the time, oh, can't go out, oh, can't do this. I mean, if you know that you're doing that for 6 months and at the end of 6 months you'll have all the money, that's a bit different. But if you know you're doing this over a longer period, I mean, you know, there's no way to suck the fun out of life than just by living like that. So I did the budget, and I made sure that my savings were automated every month from my salary. So it wasn't a kind of, oh, should I put money into savings this month? Oh, should I not? No, it goes out like clockwork. And because I've done the budget, I know that what I have to live on within what I've allocated myself, I then have to budget that amount and stay within. Like, for me, there was no kind of dipping into the savings because you want to buy something. Like, no, we're not doing any of that. So for me, that's where the discipline came. Once it's in the savings, we don't touch that, you know. So I gave myself an allowance every month, and that was what I basically had to live with. And then obviously, you know, as my salary increased, I increased that amount, and I just increased it automatically. What I didn't do was kind of upgrade my lifestyle because now I earn more money and now I can be more lavish. No, what I took that opportunity to put more of that money into the savings.
That's good. I just wanted to dwell on a few things that you've said, which I think is quite helpful. And I think a few people have also said in previous interviews that when you're saving towards a house, or even when you live in the house, there are bills that are going to come. And for you to kill yourself for like 5 years just because you want to buy a house, it kind of turns into an idol. Like, you can't live your life. Everything is put on hold for that particular thing. And you said that have a budget, basically have a budget. What you should also do is at least be very clear and automate whatever goes into savings so that you can still live your life. But you cannot do that if you don't have a clear budget in place and it's not a realistic budget. So sometimes our budgets are so strict just to say we have a budget, and at the end of every month we kind of blow our budgets, like, because it doesn't make sense at all. And even if life is for the living, you still have to save for your future and whatever you're doing in the future. So that's very good. One thing you also said was when you get your promotions or you get your salary increases and stuff like that, you increase amounts going towards your savings. Did you also increase a bit of your lifestyle expenses? Because we still have to live. Did you do that, or everything went towards your savings?
So obviously I did. I mean, what's the point getting a promotion, getting more money, and you're still like, you know. So I think proportionately I was able to allocate myself a bit more than, but actually the reality is that happened kind of around the time that COVID started. So in actual fact, even though I could do, there was nowhere to go. I mean, I was just doing like Amazon every day, was at my house because I needed it. But the reality is there was I wasn't paying transport. The first thing I did when they announced the lockdown was I applied to TfL for a rebate on my monthly travel card because I got about £100 back from that. So I didn't have that as an ongoing cost, which was great. You know, people like me who, when they're at work, they're not prudent enough to kind of make their own lunch, have to buy their lunch. So I didn't have that cost. So actually, although I did give myself a bit of an allowance, at the same time, I was a bit like, oh, I've given myself this a bit extra, but actually I don't really need this right now. I could really just, I mean, it did allow me to buy a few things during lockdown and just kind of relieve myself from like the everyday, can't leave the house, what can you do? Just like shop on the internet. But I think, you know, you have to give yourself a bit of slack and a bit of, you know, freedom and a bit of enjoyment, so to speak.
Prior to us starting the real conversation, we're talking about, you did say the house prices have gone up and it felt like you felt like at a point you weren't ever going to buy, you're thinking of renting. So though you were saving, how are you deciding how much to save every month, knowing that house prices may definitely go up? What is informing your savings amount every month? Is it, assuming you're planning to buy a house worth, let's say 280,000, are you saving towards 300,000 or you're saving towards 280,000, exactly 280,000? What's your plan?
To be honest with you, that's a very good question, and this is going to probably sound a little bit unwise, but at no point have I ever really done that. I think I've just been putting away what's the most that I can afford to put away in a month. and still live, because it wasn't like, oh, maybe let's say for instance I could put away 1,500 a month, but actually I'm only going to put 1,000 because that's as much. Like I felt like once I'd done all of my living expenses, any bills that I had, travel costs, etc., I was putting away what I felt I could put away. So for me it was kind of, well, I'll periodically be checking the pot, periodically be checking house prices, and whatever I can get, I can get. And I got to a point actually, maybe about a year ago, where I was a bit like, okay, I feel like I've got something a little bit decent now. What can I get? And I went looking, and I was just like, right, well, clearly not very much. And I remember, and I think my brother, because he's bought a house like a long time ago. And, you know, when I told him, when I worked out like the agreement in principle, what the bank would lend me, and then what deposit I'd need to top up to the house prices. And no, I think based on the agreement in principle, based on my salary at the time, I kind of set myself, okay, this is what I can afford. This is what the bank will lend me. This is what I have in deposits. If I put the two together, this is my budget for the house. And I went looking, and I was just like, I am not living in any of these places. So I was just like, okay, so let me have a rethink. And I was a bit like, oh, this is really not. So I thought, okay, well, I have to keep going. I have to keep saving. The problem that we've got now is that as we kept saving in the past year, the house prices have just shot up astronomically. Yeah. And then it's just a bit like, gosh, like you thought you might be getting somewhere if things were a little bit stable. Yeah. And now it's like you are now chasing the house prices, and it's just so that was the point at which I had to start thinking creatively. Like obviously Help to Buy came out, and look, most people don't want to have to do these government schemes, you know, Help to Buy, shared ownership. I had to start thinking, oh, I really didn't want to do these schemes, but maybe if things keep going the way they are, maybe I just have to like not swallow my pride, but just start thinking, look, you know, and just be really realistic about, look, get somewhere, you know, start building the equity, think about whether you want to stay long term, have a plan if you're doing Help to Buy for the 5 years once the interest hits. If you're doing shared ownership, you know, think about the area, look at resale values, look at what your options are for exit, make sure you get something that has, you know, a decent lease length where the terms are okay, that's an easy resale. And I had to start thinking about all the options basically, because I thought if I stay here forever saying I haven't got enough, it's gone up again another 10,000, all right, let me save for another year, it's gone up again, you know, I'll be here forever. And I feel like at some point you just kind of have to jump and just get the best you can. And at one point I thought, look, remember I was telling you, I said to you, look, the best I can get is maybe like 2-bedroom terraced house in Kent. So, and you know, you were the one that said to me, look, you have options if you just think a little bit wider. And so that's really helped me a lot.
Yeah, that's good. Please, let's talk a bit more about the fact that you got your AIP, looked at your finance, you thought, I don't want to live in any of the houses that this AIP is going to give me. And I think we need to talk about it a bit more, because sometimes we have dreams of, I want a 3-bed nice house, I want to live in it, but then you look at the finance and everything, you're like, this is not going to happen. And then you have to try and re-strategize everything to that. Please talk a bit more about that. How come you came to the decision that, look, although I really want a house and my finances are not intact, I don't think I want to live in any of these things? Were you ever forced to just buy for buying sake? Or just talk about it, please.
So there's two things. The first thing was that I wanted a house. I didn't want to buy a flat. And part of the reason I didn't want to buy a flat was because a lot of the press that was coming out following Grenfell about you know, lease lengths, cladding, of course, remediation costs and all of that. And, you know, a big one for me was service charges. And I kind of feel like if you buy a flat and you've planned your expenses and then the service charges start going up, I just thought most people's salaries are not going up to that degree that you can. I just thought I can't be in a position where, you know, within a year I'm suddenly finding it difficult to live. So a flat for me was out of the question. And obviously within London, flats are a lot more available, you know, whether they be open market, shared ownership, Help to Buy, whatever, they're a lot more, because obviously the land space it's easier to build upwards than it is to build like 100 houses on a plot. So, but I had never particularly been keen on living in London and buying in London. I always thought, look, I'd be quite happy living on the outskirts, maybe slightly more green space, a little bit more rural, but close enough to get into London. So when I was looking about this time last year, actually, because I just found an email the other day that I sent to a broker on the 23rd of December to kind of make contact with him and talk about, so when you know, he got the AIP for me, and I started looking, and I was just like, oh, you know, it's just kind of things are a little bit like dilapidated, need a lot of work. And, you know, one of the things you have to think about is if you're saving so much to put into a deposit, you need money for legal fees, you need money for moving costs, you need to furnish the house. But on top of all of that, if the house now needs a lot of work, you then have to be looking for money to be doing, pulling down wallpaper, redecorating, renovating, refurbishing, and, you know, changing kitchen, changing bathroom. And I was just like, I can't do all of that. I cannot, I don't even want to, I don't have the inclination to do all of that. So when I saw what I could get for the money, I think I just, for a while, I just sort of stopped looking, I put my head back down, and I just said, we need to just start adding more money. But what I have done is, since that time, pretty much throughout the whole year, I've been actively looking. I've been actively keeping an eye on house prices. I've been looking at what my options are. And because I don't want to be in this for like another 5 years, keep saving, and the thing is still out of reach. So that's why I said I started looking at what my options were beyond that particular location that I said I want to live in, and beyond that particular house type. You know, my brother's probably sick of me, but every week I like send him a message to be like, right, that's it, I'm going to get a flat. I'm just going to get a new build flat, and, you know, I'm just going to have to deal with it. If the service charge, I'm just going to, and he, you know, it's good to have people, because he'll say, look, just don't be hasty. Don't buy something that you'll regret. Don't be in a hurry, you know, make sure. So then, obviously, it was when you started telling me, but there's other places in the country besides North Kent. Like, this is not the only place you can live. And that really broadened my horizons, and it really gave me more options. And I think you need to be flexible. You know, when I realized that the money was like this, you can't necessarily, some people will, but you can't necessarily get everything you want in your first home, especially if you're buying alone and, you know, your plan is obviously to have a family. That house, you can't buy your forever home today. No. It's not always realistic. So
I think just a few people have been able to buy the forever home on the first buy. But if you're doing it alone, or you just want to get on the property ladder but still have enough of what you need in the house, that you will not be able to buy your forever home. But there's nothing wrong with that, actually, because if you want to build a life with someone later on, maybe he wants something different, you have more children that you ever dreamt of, you never know. So yeah.
And I think also for me, because at the time, I think I had a little bit of a thing about new builds. I didn't really want to buy a new build. I thought older homes are better. And at the time, I think actually they were still building a lot of new build homes as leasehold. And, you know, there was a lot of scandal about that. And why should a new build house ever be a leasehold? And I just thought, and ground rent and all that. I just thought, I'm not getting into all of that. And then obviously quite recently, the law has changed quite a lot. And even the developers have changed quite a lot. So actually now most of the new build homes are built as freehold. And I just thought, actually, maybe I need to consider a new build, because you know, no renovation costs, none of that DIY and having to repaint, refurbish. A lot of them come with integrated appliances, so that's a good chunk of money that I would spend on white goods that I don't have to spend. And okay, I think generally, you know, new builds, I think they're a bit smaller than perhaps some older freehold houses, but you know, if I could buy a new build, you know, it's better insulated, so lower energy bills. So actually a lot of that started to make sense, and it started to appeal to me, because I am not given to DIY. I don't have those skills. And I keep looking at these houses and thinking, how much is it going to cost in labor for me to get somebody to do all this, and materials, or am I going to have to learn this myself? Like, I can't do this stuff myself, I'll mess it up. And I just thought, you know what, maybe a new build is safe for me, and it will just save me a lot of stress. So I've had to be flexible in thinking about what my options are.
So when I was looking at mine, I wasn't interested in new builds as well, because I'd read somewhere that they make like profit in excess of 30% profit. And I'm like, why would I pay for something that's like, so what I live in now, it's like, I bought it for 310, 315. And the same house type is being sold in the same locality. I don't want to mention it because we're online, but in the same locality for 387, a newer one. Like, I'm like, why would I pay for that? But then I got this one, and I've never painted in my life before. But I was like, why? I got someone who's come and quote for painting the living room, and they're like, you charge me 400. I was like, but let's talk about your choice deciding between new build or older build and the service charge stuff, because even with a new build development or estate, they still have like estate charges like £250 a month, £120 a month, and it still quite doesn't make sense to me, because they use it for street lighting and things like that, but they really don't do anything because you're still paying council tax and stuff. So talk to me through your process, because I know we talked about it before I started the recording, but talk me through your process of deciding between a new build and an older build, and then we'll talk about your location discussion in your head.
To be honest with you, I still look at both. And it wasn't a kind of like, even I remember just yesterday, I feel like my life at the moment is consumed by property searches. I feel like that's all I do. Like, I go to bed and I'm just like, let me just check again what else has come up. But it never got to a point where I said, right, I've decided I'm only buying new build. Yeah. It effectively was, what can I get for the money? And it was kind of me seeing, okay, if I was buying an older house and I want 3 bedrooms with a good amount of downstairs space, this is what I'd get for 300,000. If I want to buy a new build, comparatively, for 300,000, I might get 2 bedrooms, but then I might get something that doesn't really need any refurbishment, any work. Effectively, I can move straight in. The only thing I need to buy is like, you know, the furnishings for the house. I don't need to buy any white goods. So for me, it's a constant kind of weighing up, what am I willing, what am I able to do? And even when I've been looking at older houses, I'm looking at houses that somebody else has already done up, so I don't need to do too many things. But I think the thing with older houses, you always have to be aware. When I say older houses, I'm talking maybe like more Victorian, not like your 5 to 10 years recently built type houses. I'm talking like older. But even though something might look like it's been modernized, it's got new kitchens, got new bathroom, it's been decorated, I think the reality is the older a house is, the more the unseen thing. When you're looking at Rightmove, they're not telling you that the whole thing needs rewiring, the electric. And a lot of that stuff you'll only find out when you've done the surveys. And actually, by this point, I guess you're emotionally committed. You spent a good amount of money on legal fees and searches and stuff. And at that point, it's like, oh, do you want to pull out? Do you not? Do you want to go ahead? Do you want to start all over again with another one? And so I have that in the back of my mind. And I think to myself, if I'm buying an older house, I need to be aware of the fact that there may be other costs besides just redecorating, or even if it's decorated, there's likely to still be other costs. And I'm prepared to learn how to paint properly and evenly, and I'm prepared to learn, you know, basic DIY. But if I'm going to spend a lot of money having to do very extensive, do I personally right now have the capacity and the willingness to do that? And so I think that's where I find myself constantly kind of swerving to the side of new build. Now, new builds, I wouldn't say they're the perfect properties to buy. Yes, they need very little refurbishment and perhaps very little work initially. I think obviously a lot of them need to be snagged, and I think it helps to get a snagger just to check all of that. But provided the developers will fix what they need to fix, it is effectively a move straight in and just get your furniture and move in. But, you know, I think there's trade-offs to be made. Generally, I think a lot of the bedroom sizes are smaller than perhaps older, you know, Victorian style houses. I think the downstairs living areas can be a bit smaller, and so, you know, it's a compromise. And one of the things, you know, my brother keeps on telling me, you know, every time I'm like, oh, should I get this? And this is a bit closer, this is further over, but it's bigger. And he's just like, listen, there will always be a compromise when you buy a house. Unless you are like multimillionaire, you can buy whatever house you like, you are always going to have to compromise on something. And it's for you to decide what is your point of compromise.
Yeah, that's I like it. That's so good. So even with so when I started looking, I started around 220,000. That's what the house I wanted to buy, like 2017 or 2018. And then I had this Excel sheet where I had the bills of quantity. So I kind of go to the house, look at the work that needs to be done, and I'll kind of do all the sums of what needs to be done. And one of the houses was like, she was willing to sell it to me for, I think, 205 or something like that. It was a nice terraced house, 3-bedroom terraced house, but it was really small. It was built by Bellway, I think 12 years ago, but it looked, she kind of ran it down a lot. And when I did all the bills of quantities of the work that needed doing, it was like 28,000 or so, and you always have to add like 15% to it, even though I'm a civil engineer, I can do the cost. And I was like, okay, 30,000. I had saved enough to do it, but in my head I was thinking, why would I want to buy that? Like, it's just crazy. So I put the offer in, and then I was like, God, if she accepts this offer, that's it. And she accepted it. There were 3 hours I put it offer in. I was like, she said, that's it. But then I kind of had a cold feet and I pulled out of it and stuff. But then I thought about it and I said, if they come and do this work and it's actually more than 10% extra, I'm dead. Like, I have not got money anywhere else to do this. And I didn't know about going for a loan or anything like that. But with the new build thing as well, I've seen so many horror stories about people who've moved into their new builds and the ceiling has fallen down because of a leak or weird things like that. But like your brother says, it's always a compromise. There's always a fear factor, but it's you doing as much surveys as you can. So I say, do your survey before you instruct your solicitor. So you get your solicitor and say, wait until I do my survey, and then you can negotiate on price and things. In the UK, unfortunately, we haven't got buyer's agents, so you haven't got anyone to help you negotiate on the price. So you're stuck with whatever the agent and their seller do. But it would have been easier if we had someone to negotiate on our behalf. But I think if anyone is buying, do your surveys, find out exactly the problem with the house before you instruct the solicitor and go back to the seller. I think sometimes as well, we kind of feel pressure to buy because we've paid for a survey. But I'm thinking, if I paid for, let's say, £400 for a survey, I'd rather lose £400 than lose like £4,000 later on. So what I did when I planned on buying was I took buyer's insurance, that if anything happens and I have to pull out, that's it. And it's only £60. I'm like, I don't really want to spend £60, but for me, it was safer for me to do that than to do this. Okay.